If I were to pick a common theme for this week's PMQs, it would be Rishi Sunak being defeated by the concept of time. We'll get to that. First off, there's a project to create an industrial site in the northeast called Teesworks, and that project was originally part-owned by private developers on the one hand, and effectively the local government on the other. But lots of concerns have been raised about corruption in that project because the private developers went from having a 50% share to a 90% share without spending any money. Especially concerning when one of the shareholders in Teesworks donated £2,500 each to two Tory MPs, Deanna Davison and Simon Clarke. So when an MP asks Rishi Sunak to get the National Audit Office to investigate this for corruption, he says,
"The Levelling Up Secretary has already announced an investigation into this matter."
But Michael Gove said that he wasn't going to get the National Audit Office to investigate this, but was going to handpick some people himself. We have an issue of Tory MPs potentially taking bribes, and you want the investigation into that to be controlled by Michael Gove, who voted to let Tory MP Owen Paterson get away with taking bribes. Can you see the problem there? But he goes on to say,
"After years of neglect, it's the Conservatives that are delivering for Teesside."
Which years? You've been in power for the last 13. Then comes his little victory lap of what the IMF said about our economy.
They actually raised our growth forecast by one of the highest they've ever done.
Should we have a listen to what the IMF actually said about why they're more optimistic about us now?
As to why we are upgrading the projections for growth for the UK. One, when we did our previous projection, it was in the midst of financial stress in the US, and at that time, we have not yet seen what we now see, the positive of the decisive action of Bank of England.
Well, Rishi Sunak can't take credit for any of that because the Bank of England isn't under UK government control.
Two, more predictable relations with the EU coming from the Windsor Agreement.
So our economy is doing better because the Tories have managed to undo some of the damage that they've done to our economy via Brexit.
Three, energy prices have receded.
Again, Rishi Sunak can't take credit for global energy prices. And he doubles down.
Said that we've acted decisively to make sure that the economy is growing.
Again, the only mention of decisive action in the IMF report is referring to the Bank of England raising interest rates, which he tries to take credit for. And on the NHS,
ambulance waiting times at the fastest response in 2 years, Mr. Speaker. That's a Conservative government delivering for the British people.
2 years ago was the first half of 2021, so you're saying that a Conservative government delivering for the British people is giving us hospitals that are slightly less overflowing than at the height of a deadly pandemic. Thanks.
We've introduced new powers to curb disruptive protests.
You're bragging about a law that your own Human Rights Committee says breaches our human rights.
We're protecting public services against undisruptive strike action, Mr. Speaker.
It's the Freudian slip for me because, yeah, the real disruption is the fact that you've been cutting civil service wages for the last 13 years, forcing them to go on strike. And now you're bragging about taking away the only leverage they have to improve things. Then it's pointed out that ordinary people don't get to have free lawyers when they go to court unless they're making less than £13,000 a year, and yet the taxpayer is being forced to pay £250,000 for Boris Johnson's lawyer so he can defend himself for lying about Partygate. And Rishi Sunak responds by saying that it's tradition
that former ministers are supported with legal representation after they have left office to deal with matters that relate to their time in office.
Which is really awkward because after he finished speaking, Boris Johnson cut ties with his free lawyers because he wanted better ones. Thus proving that that tradition doesn't need to be a tradition for millionaire politicians because you just wasted £250,000. That timing must be gutting for you.